Now, last but not least, I want to talk a little about my attitude throughout the years.
Alrighty, welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for clicking on today's video. Today we're going to be talking about Abbey Sharp, who we actually have not talked about in a while. So Abbey Sharp is a registered dietitian who makes videos on YouTube. We've talked about Abbey quite a bit. I mean, granted, it's been a few years since we have talked about Abbey, but she recently uploaded this video right here, which is titled, I Was Wrong and How I've Changed, Ozempic, Haze, Intuitive Eating, and More. So if you're not familiar with Abbey, her kind of claim to fame, the thing that really got her kind of put on the map was she would do reactions to people's full day of eatings, right? And a lot of the kind of ways that she would respond to things were, a lot of people felt a little bit snarky. They were a little bit like over the top, but she would try and share how she felt about the nutrition and maybe how she didn't really agree with it. She actually ended up doing I think she did a reaction to one of my full days of eating when I used to do those. And I think it was actually relatively like positive. Like she didn't really have much negative to say. That's just because I'm literally the best and I never make any mistakes. I'm just kidding. But yeah, so she did a review on that. And I think that's when we started, I wouldn't say like talking, but like videos back and forth kind of started happening because I think I did like a reaction to that. I don't really remember, right? It's been many years at this point. But that was kind of a thing that she did. And during this time, she was definitely very pro health at every size. Maybe not the most pro. There are some people that were definitely like, further down the pipeline than I feel that she was. She was very much so pro in like intuitive eating, which if you're not familiar with that kind of concept, intuitive eating is, I think at the core, a positive thing where it's like, you should just not feel like you have to track every single thing. But a lot of times the people that were very pro intuitive eating were also very anti any sort of tracking at all under any circumstances, which made me not like that term anymore because there was a while when I used to talk about intuitive eating and I was a fan of it, but then it became this like buzzword that people were using. And so I started being like, I don't do intuitive eating, I do mindful eating, which was a whole nother thing that I kind of talked about where, the way that I see mindful eating is I learned how to track and all of those tools like tracking and doing all of that. I did that for a few years and that taught me a lot that I'm able to now, use in my everyday life. And so I am mindful about the foods that I'm eating, but I'm kind of getting off topic, but those were some big, kind of big buckets that she really talked a lot about. And I think recently there has been a little bit more blowback, and I think the tides are shifting away from that kind of content being like super pro haze. I don't think that that's very popular anymore. I think there are some people that feel that Abbey is kind of saying sorry to kind of save face because it's no longer popular. But I'm going to stop ranting. I'm kind of rambling for too long. Let's just get into this video and I will share how I feel about what she's saying.
So if you look back at my
Also, we did skip a little bit because it's basically just like an ad for the first like 3 minutes. And so it's not worth going over.
Early content catalog, but hopefully not too early because it's kind of embarrassing. But you might have seen that I kind of tended to lean more heavily into the anti-diet message. That all weight loss diets are bad and that dieting is basically disordered. And honestly, that's likely because I was coming into my career having been freshly burned by orthorexia, very much aware of its sneaky traps and signs and red flags, and very passionate about protecting others from falling victim. And
that is commendable, but what was frustrating for a lot of people, and even myself to a degree, was it felt like, with Abbey especially, it was, if you don't agree with me, then you are just basically wrong, right? So if you're someone that, like she's coming from the orthorexia side, right? Being overly worried about food and being overly concerned and really focusing on, eating only healthy foods. If you don't know what that disorder is, it's basically, for a very basic explanation, is like you only eat certain foods that you in your head deem as healthy, right? So a lot of times people that will have this kind of will be like, I only eat chicken and broccoli, right? That's all I eat because that's the only thing that's healthy, right? So it's like overly worrying about the health of food, right? And so that's what it seemed to manifest that way for her, but it felt like there was no desire to see it from the other side, right? If you are someone that is coming from where I came from, which was overeating and being extremely overweight, for me, tracking and learning about macros, learning about nutrition literally made it so I could start making better decisions. It was very frustrating as someone watching this, as someone that obviously Abbey is a registered dietitian, which is actually, it's very interesting. If like I think there's been studies about this, but a lot of times people that are registered dietitians, a lot of them have dealt with different EDs and stuff like that. I'm sure that there's a correlation there, but it just felt like she was very like, she only sees things in her way, and it was like she would not even try to see things from another perspective, and it was very frustrating, like for me, and I'm sure other people that maybe reacted to some of the content that she made at the time.
And just because of the way that social media works, once you make like just a few videos with a specific MO or perspective, suddenly that is your brand. Like you are forced to niche down into a box, and therefore any nuance gets very quickly snuffed out.
Okay. I understand where she's coming from, but it definitely feels like it is completely taking any like just shifting any responsibility, right? While yes, that is technically true, right? Where you get kind of like forced to, you want to make certain content because that's what people are expecting. It doesn't change how you should feel internally, right? And so like, while it might make you, okay, I was doing full day of eating videos, and then I did this video where I was talking about this thing, and that video was really popular, and so then I continued to make videos talking about whatever, right? Like I was making videos about nutrition, and then I made a video about Spider-Man, and that video blew up, and then I decided to start making Spider-Man videos now, right? Like that's something that makes sense, but it doesn't really, for me, just because the algorithm or, a video does a certain thing, it doesn't, like, it's not going to change how I feel about things, right? And I feel like that's where a lot of the frustration is for people, because it feels like she's taking responsibility, but also being like, well, it was the algorithm, and so I just had to be that way. It's like, the algorithm is not going to make you change how you feel fundamentally about a topic, right? That apparently, you're a dietitian, you've done a lot of research, so it should be something that you feel that you've done research and you've come to a conclusion that makes sense to you, more than I did a bunch of research, but then I made a video that was popular, and then I was like, okay, that's how I feel. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of how it's coming across here.
Thankfully, I am no longer new to the rodeo. At 37, I have had almost 20 years of separation from my ED days, and I have opened myself up to a wide range of perspectives from every corner of the scientific community. I have worked really hard at listening and understanding the root of a particular approach or recommendation before just shutting it down as BS, simply because it doesn't align with my experience or my previous bias. But that shift can be kind of hard for viewers and fans when we have all learned to see content creators not as people, but as brands with just one predictable beat. And that means that a lot of my old content doesn't always align completely with what I say now. Ultimately though, I am way more committed to being a good science communicator than a predictable content creator. And to do that, I've really had to soften my messaging to allow for much needed nuance and consideration. So today
that's interesting again, because it feels like it's almost like, well, like how I feel actually hasn't really changed, but it's like I do a better job of like masking it so I don't upset the viewers. I don't know. This is a very weird way to approach this. Like if you genuinely feel like, hey, I am sorry about the things that I made before, I don't agree with what I said. One, I feel like the easiest thing would be I'm going to delete some of those videos, especially if it's like I'm really, really like not happy about that. Or just don't make this video, where you're like apologizing, but also not, right? Because if you're just like, maybe I'm not the happiest about it, but I don't feel that bad about it, whatever, right? Just you move on. But it's very weird. It's like she wants people to be like, oh, wow, we're so glad that you did that. But also like a lot of the responsibility, it feels like she's not taking it herself. She's just like, well, the viewers, either they kind of forced me to be overly excitable and over the top because that's what the viewers wanted. And now it's like, but also I'm not changing that much because I don't want to scare the viewers away. I don't know. There's no responsibility being taken.
I want to set the record straight and spill the tea on what I really think on topics like weight loss, Ozempic, health at every size, supplements, and so much more. Consider this my professional reintroduction. So grab a snack or a coffee, get comfy, and allow me to reintroduce myself.
Allow me to reintroduce myself.
Let's start off hot with weight loss drugs. Honestly, if Ozempic came onto the scene like 10 years ago, I probably would have fully written it off. Like, I can already see like 2012 Abbey zeroing in on all those health risks without really weighing those against its efficacy. But what I understand today is just how important it is to approach these topics from a macro view with greater curiosity and empathy. Now, with weight loss drugs specifically, I have learned that despite the risks and side effects, these drugs have been revolutionary in reshaping people's lives. You know, weight gain and weight loss are incredibly complex processes shaped by so much more than just food or willpower. So for example, genes or genetics can actually impact dopamine reward pathways and how intensely we react to food, which when combined with a hyper-palatable food environment plus socioeconomic factors, it can make sustainable weight loss feel virtually impossible. So GLP-1s work not just by stabilizing blood sugars, which does have an effect on weight management, but also by quieting the food noise that makes weight loss or even weight maintenance so damn hard. So from my perspective, I do see how drugs like these can actually give folks the mental space to fill with other acts of self-care and health promoting activities because they are no longer hardwired to just think about food. That has got to be so freeing. Now, obviously, with all that said, just because I see value in GLP-1s for a certain demographic doesn't mean I think that they are for everyone to be using. There are very brutal side effects and risks. They absolutely can be misused. And when weight loss can be commodified, it does further stigmatize those who don't hop on board. And we saw...
Now, honestly, with this, I don't even necessarily really disagree a ton with what she said there. And like, this is kind of where I've been sitting with the GLP-1 stuff as well, is because it definitely feels like right now we're in this place where it feels like you either have to be all in or all out, which is very frustrating for me because I always try and see the kind of gray area in between. And with GLP-1s specifically, I'm obviously, I am someone that quote unquote lost weight naturally, whatever that even means. I didn't use a GLP-1, and I do believe fully in my heart of hearts that people can lose weight without using a GLP-1, without getting a surgery, right? But just because I say that, does that mean I think that anyone that uses a GLP-1 or gets a weight loss surgery is cheating or is a failure? No, that's not how I feel. But I also think it is of utmost importance that people believe that they can do it on their own. Okay? That is important to me because I was able to do it, and I don't think there's anything radically special about me, right? And I had a lot of things going against me when it came to losing the weight, right? But I was able to do it. And so I just want people to understand that they can do that. And then on top of that with GLP-1s, more than anything is kind of what she brought up is the commodification of it and how it's become basically a way for people to make money, right? We talked about it in one of my recent videos with how on TikTok, people are literally going on TikTok Live and just selling Ozempic to people basically, right? Through different companies, and they're getting a kickback of every person that gets sold on these GLP-1s. And it's very easy to game the system to get a GLP-1 when you absolutely shouldn't be using it, right? You can lie about your weight. You can lie about all the information because you're not meeting a doctor. None of that stuff is happening, right? You're just filling out a form online and poof, there you go, right? That is not okay, right? And so I've always been kind of in the middle about this. And so, as far as the videos that I've made with talking about Abbey or having something to do with this, it was really, I think, before the GLP-1 and Ozempic things were super popular and people were really talking about it. So, as far as this, I didn't really even know her stance very much on the GLP-1 Ozempic stuff. And so, I would say that more or less we kind of agree on that stuff. But again, I haven't done a ton of research on exactly what she said and how she feels about it.
Many of these things firsthand in my Ozempic diary series, where I followed a real life experience with Ozempic. And I 100% think it's important to talk about these issues that may or may not be mentioned amongst all of the drug's benefits. But being vehemently against Ozempic or seeing it as like an easy way out, as wellness culture seems to suggest, does far more harm than good. It's stigmatizing, ableist, and exclusionary, especially for folks who are already struggling to access care. So if you are able to improve your health, quality of life, and happiness with Ozempic, then amazing. We should all be happy for you. Next up, let's talk about supplements. So just over a year ago, I launched a supplement line, New Theory. And we really came into this with the mission.
Okay, so we're going to kind of skip through this because it's just kind of weird. It kind of ends up turning into an ad for her supplement brand. And so obviously I don't really want to have an ad for her supplement brand on my video, but I thought that was kind of weird. It felt a little disingenuous because it's like, I don't know. It just felt a little unnecessary to have this whole section where she's basically talking about how, you know, she hasn't been the biggest fan of supplements, but her supplements, she agrees, she thinks those are great. And so that's kind of how I feel about that. It just felt a little strange that existing in this video, you know, supplements are one thing, but to have this huge portion of the video that's already had a sponsored ad in it from Element, I don't know. It just felt a little icky to me is the best way to put it. So now let's get into the stuff that I really feel like I had a lot of experience with Abbey in our previous, interactions.
The next topic might ruffle a few feathers, but we're going to be talking about health at every size, aka haze. So first, the good. I made this video 5 years ago or so speaking to the benefits of haze, which I still absolutely do agree with. There are a lot of things that I really respect about the haze movement. So for example, its weight neutral approach, social justice framework, and the work to reduce anti-fat stigma and provide accessible care for all. But haze also does challenge a lot of traditional scientific knowledge in the weight loss space, namely that weight is not a significant driver of health outcomes.
So, I mean, I don't necessarily disagree with what she said at the start there. I think there's a lot of good stuff. I've talked a lot about that when it comes to haze, but it's just so funny. It's like they challenge the scientific evidence. I'm like, what do you mean they challenge it? Oh man, that's so funny.
Now, near the start of my career after recovering from an ED and really feeling like I had been kind of saved by anti-diet and intuitive eating movements, there seemed to be this really big push towards the kind of haze approach within the intuitive eating or anti-diet community.
Interesting, right? So it was really popular at the time, is basically what she's saying here.
And it got to the point where it almost felt like if you even acknowledged any legitimate health risks of obesity, like type 2 diabetes or some cancers, liver damage, whatever, that you were like a traitor because all of those things could actually be explained by the impact of weight stigma.
Yes, and that was what was so unbelievably frustrating when I was making videos at the start, especially like when I first heard about this stuff. I remember being like, okay, I understand where you're coming from, but like we can't ignore the fact that being significantly overweight for an extended period of time has negative health outcomes. And that is something that we should avoid, as well as so many people's lived experience of having a bunch of weight on them and then losing the weight and how much better they just feel, right? How much better their knees feel, how much better their back feels, how much better, how they no longer have type 2 diabetes, right? Or whatever, like whatever. Yes, it's anecdotal, but it is so comprehensive and so many people have had this experience that to act like it is just not true or that the only reason people have these problems, and basically what she's saying here is that, with haze, what they would say is like the reason that people have such bad health from being overweight is not the weight, it's how society treats them because of the weight. And I'm sorry. Like, yes, there's slight things that I can understand, like being mistreated at the doctor's office, maybe things not being caught because doctors are just like, you just lose weight. That's the only thing that's wrong with you. You just need to lose weight, right? Yes. But there are so many things that you can be affected by being significantly overweight, that to say that it's all because of society and how it's treating you is just ridiculous, right? And it was very frustrating for me at the time trying to talk about this, because it felt like, if, like she's saying, if you had any sort of like, hey, I mean, yeah, we should treat people, of course, with respect, and everyone deserves respect, but like, let's not say that you can be healthy at any size, right? If you said that, then you were just automatically a villain, right? And that's kind of how I was treated. It was very frustrating because I tried to be as honest as I could while still being as understanding as I could at the same time. And it felt like Abbey definitely leaned further in the health at every size kind of camp of things, I guess would be the best way to put it.
You couldn't even say the word obesity without getting called out, which really gave way to like these very lengthy 20-minute long disclaimers in every video. It was actually a really stressful experience as a creator because I was just always worried about offending someone. But today, my perspective is a lot more nuanced.
So interesting, right? Now that it's no longer as popular, opinion has changed.
Often say now, I support body autonomy and I want to meet people where they are. So for one person, a more weight neutral approach is going to feel supportive, whereas for others, intentional weight loss is going to be desired. I also don't censor science, so while it is true that weight stigma does affect health and around 10 to 25% of obese folks are considered metabolically healthy, which are core messages in the haze spaces, we still do know that obesity and excess fat is a major driver of chronic disease.
And I don't know, like, it's just interesting, right? Because while yes, like I don't know what these numbers are, like how we're finding these numbers for obesity, right? Because technically I am still I think considered obese, like if you look at my BMI, because I'm 5'8" and I weigh 210 pounds, right? But like I would hope that I'm pretty sure I would be considered metabolically healthy. Jesus, I'm pretty sure I would be considered that, right? And so I don't know. It feels like these numbers are kind of, I don't know, nebulous, I guess. Like they might mean something, but they could also mean nothing, if that makes any sense.
Research even shows that even a modest 5 to 10% weight loss can have significant physical health benefits, not to mention the profound effects on emotional well-being and quality of life. And even if you're losing weight for aesthetic reasons, who am I to decide that that is not best for you? Like, as long as it's not promoting harmful messages to the masses or coming at the expense of your health, it's really not for me to condemn. But when I see a very irresponsible
Yes, I agree with that. But then what she says right here is just so so funny, because I mean, it kind of is what she does, right? And fair enough, like it is what it is, right? I make videos where I'm kind of judging people on the internet too, but but like, just listen to what she says right here. It's so funny. So she just said that, and then
your health, it's really not for me to condemn. But when I see a very irresponsible what in a day video slammed with falsehoods and insanely problematic tips, I am 100% always going to take it down. Bottom line,
oh, that's just so funny to me.
I do think that two things can be true. We can fight for systemic change, kindness, and accommodations towards larger body folks, and we can fight for better solutions and treatments if people do seek weight loss as a way to improve their quality of life. So that's really where I'm at when it comes to weight loss today. Okay.
I mean, yep, I agree with those last 2 points. I think that those things should be able to exist at the same time.
Moving on to a related topic, intuitive eating. I have made a lot of intuitive eating content because it's really an evidence-based framework that has been truly life-changing for me and also so many others. But in my early days, again, when I was probably a lot more caught up in kind of the more strict anti-diet haze community, I think I likely presented intuitive eating as something that everyone should be able to do because it's an innate skill. And
bro, it's so frustrating. I think I likely did this. Brother, just say what happened. Just say what happened. Hey, I did this. It was wrong. I I should have done better. I could have done better, right? Instead, it's like, I think maybe I could have done something that some people maybe considered problematic. And I mean, I didn't really mean to, and I'm not really sure why they saw it that way. And it was like, brother, there were so many people making videos talking about, hey, this is not like, I don't agree with this, or maybe you're going a little bit too far. And okay, sorry.
That was probably unfair. So like when people would say to me, well, that doesn't work for me, I would default to the commonly cited explanation that it's because you're still stuck in diet mentality. So if you want to learn to eat intuitively, you have to stop wanting to lose weight. So this, of course,
that is so unbelievably condescending, dude. Like, I appreciate and I understand that she's saying she doesn't feel that way now, but at the time, so condescending, right? To tell someone that maybe doesn't even know that much about nutrition, to be like, well, you're not allowed to count calories because that's actually disordered. You just have to eat intuitively. And it's like, dude, this is my opinion. I talked about this at the start of the video, right? Mindful eating, right? I think to be able to eat intuitively, like Abbey Sharp is saying, I think part of that comes down to understanding nutrition at a basic level. And yes, Abbey, you were able to do that because you were a registered dietitian, or you still are. I don't really know how the registering works, right? So you went to school and learned about nutrition. The vast majority of people, especially in America, don't have that knowledge. They don't have that information, and they have to figure it out for themselves. How do I know that? Because I was that person. When it comes to dieting and losing weight, when I first started, I had no idea what a calorie was. I didn't know what a carb was. I didn't know what protein, I didn't know what macros were. I didn't know any of that stuff. And so to tell someone like me, oh, you just need to eat intuitively, eat how you want. I'm like, dude, I want McDonald's. That's what I want. I want a California burrito with sour cream and guacamole, and maybe 5 roll tacos on the side, and maybe a quesadilla. That was intuitive to me growing up in Southern California. That was my intuitive eating, right? Not going to work. And so to be able to eat intuitively, I had to learn about nutrition, learn about macros, and practice that. Right? Track that. And what was so frustrating for me and so many other people was that if you showed yourself doing that, people would come online like you, respectfully, but like you, and make a takedown video saying that person has an ED and they are stuck in toxic diet culture. And then you're this person that's just trying to get healthy is like so confused because they're like, dude, I'm doing what I think I need to do, trying to understand macros and calories and nutrition, and I'm being called out for it like I'm some terrible person. You need to calm down. It was very frustrating, okay? It was very frustrating at the time, and I can understand why people are upset now, because it really does feel, Abbey, like if you truly do feel bad about what you did, this apology falls very flat because it doesn't seem like you're taking any sort of responsibility, and you're just saying, well, times have changed, times were different a few years ago, so you can't really blame me. Not everyone was making this kind of content a few years ago, right? And so like, I don't know, I just feel like some sort of a little bit more responsibility could be taken, and I think it would go pretty far for people.
Means that while intuitive eating is often idealized, it's by nature very exclusionary. Like it may be innate in a vacuum, but out in the real world, it actually requires specific physical, psychological, and environmental conditions that just aren't accessible to everyone. Not only does it alienate folks who do desire weight loss, but it may also just not be appropriate or possible for folks who are neurodivergent, managing an active eating disorder, have trauma history, are food insecure, or are taking medications or have health conditions that mess with normal appetite signaling. And I'm really just scratching the surface. I now have a much more moderate approach to intuitive eating. Like I really do think that all of the tenets can be incredibly helpful, but you don't need to subscribe to all of them to get value. Now that's not to say that we should like pick and choose the principles to the point where we are fully representing its values and calling it intuitive eating. Like I do truly cringe when I see wellness influencers share their 1,200 calorie weight loss diet and hashtag it intuitive eating, because that is co-opting an actual evidence-based framework. So that's why when I'm not talking about the intuitive eating framework as it was originally conceptualized in its entirety, I prefer to use terms like food freedom and body kindness, because I think we can make choices that support our goals in a way that still feels freeing, which is exactly the objective of my signature method, the hunger crushing combo. Now let's...
So again, this is that explanation is exactly why I just stopped using that term completely, because it just became ridiculous in my opinion. It's why mindful eating, and I don't have it trademarked, all right? So feel free to use it as much as you want, okay? Mindful eating is the way to go, guys.
Now, last but not least, I want to talk a little about my attitude throughout the years. So one of the first videos that kind of put me on the map was a review of Freely the Banana Girl. It was actually my first introduction to like the what I eat in a day format that everyone kind of knows and loves. For that, I was mainly doing recipe videos and like nutrition hacks. But I had so many people messaging me about her videos, and these were really young, like 13-year-old girls telling me that they had been trying to eat her incredibly restrictive raw vegan diet because she's beautiful and she's thin. She credits her diet to that, but they had become so physically and psychologically sick from all of her suggestions and tips.
So, and I am glad that, you know, anyone that calls out Freely for her insanity, I guess is the best way to put it. And so it's very interesting, right? Because I think that video popped off for her. And I think that in her head, she thought, well, I have to treat everyone like this. But the reality is that not everyone, almost no one, right? Freely is truly on an island herself, right? Almost no one is to the level of Freely. And so I think the way that you handle a Freely is a way that you handle a Freely, not the way that you handle every other person that you end up making a video on. And where I believe Abbey probably went wrong is that she saw how well that video did and how she reacted, which, I mean, I haven't seen the video in a long time. I don't know. Maybe it was over the top, but again, Freely probably deserved it, right? But that's not how you treat every single other person, right? And I think that's what she in her head, okay, this did well. I'm going to do this to every single person. Therefore, treat everyone like they're giving the same advice and doing the same damage. This is the most important thing. Doing the same damage that Freely is, when a lot of these people certainly were not doing that. Maybe they were spreading a little bit of misinformation, spreading diet culture or whatever. But there's a very big difference between a Freely and someone that's just maybe a little bit misinformed, right?
So when I watched it as a fresh orthorexia recovery, I was truly enraged. And people ate it up. Now, when I watched that video back, frankly, I'm a little bit embarrassed because I was a total and I own that. And unfortunately, as I alluded to earlier, the internet loves when people take a hard stand. So like snarky No BS Abbey got big views. It's the same reason why this reaction to Gwyneth Paltrow's diet was my most viewed video in 2023. I get emotional and angry, and like people will click on it because they feel the same way. It wasn't that I've been intentionally snarky or acting out emotions I didn't feel, but obviously this did encourage me to kind of play up this persona for a very long time. But here's the truth. Anyone who knows me in real life can agree that I am a true empath. I am overly sensitive and I try really, really hard not to rock the boat. All of these people perpetuating diet culture are victims of the cycle themselves. And that means they deserve to be treated with empathy and respect. It doesn't mean that they shouldn't be held accountable and corrected, because they absolutely should, especially because there are so many young people who are taking their advice. But my intention is never to shame them on a personal level. And as I've grown and found my voice, I've really tried to express that in my content. Science and sass will always be my thing, but I never want my sassiness to mislabel me as a mean girl. And I think you'll continue to see that supportiveness in my content to come, especially over on my podcast Bite Back, where I have a lot more wiggle room to express nuance over just clickbait. And with that, folks.
So that's the video, and like towards the end, right? I think it's very interesting that she basically says that she was playing a character, right, in a lot of her videos, which I think, it makes sense. I don't know Abbey personally. I wouldn't be surprised if she is, a pretty empathetic person and she was kind of playing it up. But again, no one forced that, right? we're saying that like the algorithm made me do this, but the algorithm can't make you act a certain way or say certain things in a video, right? That is a decision that you make, maybe based on how you feel the algorithm might pick up on that video or whatever. But I feel like just kind of skirting all the responsibility and just saying, well, you know, the video did well, so I just kept doing that. You should still take responsibility. And I think that's where, like, I was looking at the comments and it looked like a lot of people were kind of frustrated because it didn't feel like there was any responsibility really being taken. It's really interesting seeing the comments, right? Abby, you say you don't censor science, but omitting important facts is censoring science. That's something to be owned, no, right? So to summarize, oopsie, I spread misinformation for clout, fully realizing it, but I'm not going to apologize for it. So it's like this thing that she feels bad for, there's never really any accountability taken, and that more than anything seems to be what is frustrating people, right? And especially, and then on top of it, I know we kind of skipped over it, but the fact that there is an element ad in this video, which fair enough, whatever, but then also there's basically an ad for her supplement company. It's just like why would you put that in this video? It just doesn't really make sense. It feels like it was like trying to be this like genuine, oh man, I messed up and I'm sorry. I learned from the things that I did. It felt like that was kind of the heart of it. But then there was just so many offshoots and things that just detracted so much from that message. And then on top of it, it didn't feel like, to a lot of people as well, that there was ever really like full accountability taken. And it was just like, well, the algorithm kind of, it popped off and it's like, you know how it is. I had to keep doing that. You didn't have to keep doing that, right? But I just wanted to share my opinion on that because I've seen, you know, some people leave comments about it, and I think I've seen some other videos of thumbnails of people talking about it. So it made me, I was like, wait, what's going on? So I watched the video and I was like, oh, okay, interesting. Yeah, that's I'm glad that I checked this out. But I would love to know what y'all think down in the comments section down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace.